Most people leverage Portainer, the very, very tip of the iceberg.
This technology is so transformational, it is going to be impossible for this not to be wholesale adopted everywhere.
Portainer is one of the few tools out there that has drastically reduced my workload, but more importantly, exponentially increased my ability to have impact for my customers. And welcome to the Industry 4 Community Podcast. I'm your host with the most, Walker D. Reynolds. We got Neil Creswell, who is CEO and founder at Portainer, one of the co-founders, right? It's co-founder, right? Yep. At Portainer. Today, we're going to talk about, Portainer just released version 2.3.3, which is like, a massive change. There's a whole host of new features, complete new look and feel. You've rebranded the website. Like, Portainer's done a ton of stuff. Okay. And in this podcast, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Portainer as it pertains to Industry 4. Okay. You guys hear me talk about Portainer all the time. In mentorship last week, I deployed my development stack using Portainer, which was basically a Docker Compose file. And we actually deployed Litmus Edge Developer Edition using a Docker container in Portainer for the very first time. And if you're in mentorship or mastermind, you can go into the mentorship or mastermind channels on Discord and see those files, and you can try it out for yourself. But with that, today we're here to talk about Portainer and Industry 4. And before I bring Neil in here, I just want to say something. I would say, when we talk to OEMs, when we talk to vendors in the industry, they generally have one of four problems. Problem number one is that their product's garbage, right? It's not useful, and they're really trying to sell something that they probably should rebuild or rethink, okay? We don't work with those vendors. Problem number two is they have something of real value, but they don't know what problem it solves. Right? They have a messaging problem. They don't know what problem it solves. Problem number three is they know what problem it solves, but they can't communicate it or they can't get in front of the people who have that problem. And then problem number three is all the above. They a little bit of you built something you probably shouldn't have built. It's awesome tech, but it doesn't have a use. You don't know what its use is, or you know what its use is and you can't get in front of people. In the case of Portainer, okay, one of the things that has always frustrated me, not about your company, but about the way that the industry uses the product, is if we have a iceberg that is the full capability of Portainer to manage infrastructure. Someone asks me, what is Portainer? If you go on YouTube or Google, most people are going to say it's a Docker or Kubernetes GUI, right? It is not a Docker or Kubernetes GUI. That's like one little tiny circle inside the Venn diagram that is Portainer. Most people leverage Portainer, the very, very tip of the iceberg. They do not unlock the full potential of the platform. And a lot of what I want to talk about today is centered around that piece. All right. So with that, Neil, why don't you quickly introduce yourself and answer the question for those who aren't familiar with Portainer. Where did Portainer come from, and why should anyone use it?
All right. Thanks. Yeah. You've actually hit the nail on the head, by the way. We have an amazing product. We know the problems it solves. We just need to get it in front of the people who have the problem. And we also need to get people to understand just how vast of a product it is. It's also that's a positive and a negative. We solve a lot of problems, but so where do you start telling the story? Because if you have a problem, we can probably solve it. But then it's like, okay, well, which problem would you like us to solve for you today? And it's like sometimes it's too much and therefore quite unbelievable. Whereas in fact it is very, very real. Portainer's been around a while now. 2016 is when the first line of code was written, which is a long time ago. How have we stayed around so long? because it just works. We're not trying to be this sort of flash in the pan type product that comes in with bells and whistles, makes all of these grandiose claims, and then is gone within a year or two.
In fact, I would say you undersell the capability. You don't oversell the capability. You undersell the capability. Yeah.
Well, correct. And interestingly, I'm from New Zealand. You can tell by my accent. The company is from New Zealand, and in New Zealand we have this weird thing called tall poppy syndrome. And tall poppy syndrome, go and Google it. What it means is if you put your head out above others, it'll be chopped off. And so as a culture, and it's actually a very Australia and New Zealand thing, as a culture, you always undersell what you're doing. You always undersell. You want to just be a little bit down and quiet on yourself. That's so ingrained in our psyche. It's very hard to change that normal behavior. So as a company, our behavior is very much influenced by that too. So yes, we do undersell. Positive side, what we do say that we do well, you can guarantee we do perfectly.
Yeah, you could trust it, right? You can trust it. Where did Portainer come from? Like 2016, products either come from one of two places. Either somebody wants to get rich and they try to find a thing to build, and they see a market and they try to find something to build for that market. That rarely ever works. That's where you normally see these, big venture capital with lots and lots of investment, but it never pays off. And then the other way, that the most successful products come from, there was a problem that someone had. They looked in the market for a solution to their problem. There was no solution, or the solutions were inadequate. So they built their own solution, and then they took that to market. They solved their own problem, and then they took it to market, right? And and I know that that's Portainer's story, but where did that come from? Like, the idea to build Portainer came from where? What was the problem you were solving?
So it was very much a me thing. So I'm an engineer, always have been, always will be. I spent my life inside data centers working with VMware and storage and networking stuff, right? And so I'm one of the millions of people out there who are a VMware or virtualization trained professional, right? I know infrastructure. When I got exposed to Docker back in 2016, there was a light switch moment. The light switch turned on in my head, and I thought the world is never going to be the same again. This technology is so transformational. It is going to be impossible for this not to be wholesale adopted everywhere. However, oh my goodness, is it monumentally different from everything that we have ever seen and used before. And so Portainer for me was a knowledge shim. How can I take my existing knowledge of an IT generalist, because when you had to run infrastructure, you very much had to be an IT generalist. How do you take an IT generalist and give them the deep skills that they need, or the deep capability they need to realistically, safely and securely run a container platform? And that was the entire intent behind Portainer, was to act as this glue between what the skills that an IT generalist has, which is vast but quite shallow, versus the skills that a specialist has, which is very narrow but quite deep. And Kubernetes and Docker and the technologies that underpin now Industry 4 very much often requires a specialist, unless you have a tool like Portainer to actually smooth.
Well, it's funny, how I found Portainer was when I started working with Docker 2018, I really started advocating for it in 2020, really during the pandemic. It was like, hey, how do I manage infrastructure without having to go to the host all the time? I mean, if I can't get on site and physically work on the host, what I really need is for somebody, and there's going to be somebody at that facility who has access to the host. I need to be able to give them some type of script that they can run on a Linux server that installs the infrastructure I need there, Docker and Docker Compose, and then if they deploy the Docker container of Portainer, then I can access it. And then I can now manage the complete infrastructure of that server. I can manage all the containers that are running on that server. That was when I was really, okay, I'm going to start using Docker all the time. The problem was that my biggest complaint about command line, and I think most people in Industry 4 are complaining about command line, is there is no way for us to remember every command and every argument, and even in terminal editors that we use, like Terminus, to access command line to manage things like Docker, their auto completion isn't very good. And what Portainer gave me was, if I'm going to deploy a container in Docker and I go to deploy a new container, all the parameters and arguments are visual. So they're there on the screen. I don't have to remember what they are. I mean, it was really that simple. It was really, Portainer's free. I mean, it's free for one host, or now it's 3 hosts now, right? It's free for up to 3, or is it?
Well, the open source version is free forever, but yes, the paid version is free for 3 hosts.
Okay, for me, it was, I need to be able to visualize Docker. Okay, I need to be able to visualize that way I'm not forgetting specific arguments that I need to be passing in when I'm spinning up a container, right? That was my introduction to Portainer. But really where everything changed for me was the concept of templates and stacks. So I'm going to leave this conversation now. So Docker or Portainer covers many things: Podman, Kubernetes, Docker Swarm. It manages all sorts of containerized environments. I work with Docker Swarm and Docker mostly. Okay. And although one could really argue Portainer's biggest strength is managing Kubernetes, but we'll limit the conversation to Docker for my purposes here. Where things really changed for me was the edge capabilities, templates, and stacks, where I could start managing massive software infrastructure from a single interface across many hosts. And it's only gotten more powerful. But what I have found is the number of people who don't know the capabilities of Portainer, yet they use it all the time. Like we did a mastermind, and I asked we did a poll. How many people here have used Portainer? And it was like 70% of the students in the room. So there were 100 people, 70 people said, I use it. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew any of the features I showed in that session. I mean, that's the thing that really stood out to me. Even some of the massive power users didn't know. Like, they didn't know how to enable Edge. So when I went in to enable Edge, turn Edge on, nobody in the room knew how to do that. And we are Industry 4. And it kind of blew my mind. You know what I mean? So, well,
that to me is actually a product management problem on my side to solve. And believe you me, I'm well aware of that. And we will be fixing that activation issue. So when you moving forward, when you spin up Portainer, we're wanting to start a first setup wizard, and it'll ask you, how do you want to use this? Do you want to use it to deploy fleets? Yes, and then we'll turn on Edge stuff for you, because yes, having massive quantities of the product turned off by default and you turn it on is crazy. And by the way, that's one of the complications of us being an open source product and commercial. If we turn on too much of the commercial features by default, the open source community, which is often home technologists, get frustrated because there's too much bloat. So that is one of the problems of trying to cover such a wide.
When you enable the feature, we don't generally try to get into the weeds technically, but I'm interested. When you enable a feature in Portainer, like for example, when you turn on observability, for example, which is one of the new features in 2.3.3, what actually happens under the hood? Are you installing a new container? Is it pulling an image, or is that already is the code for that feature already there, and you're just enabling it, and now you're using memory to run it?
Correct. So basically, Portainer it has been designed to be air gapped. So we we try not to install things on demand. So everything is part of the Portainer image, but we only start the things that you need. So there are other binaries inside the Portainer container image that are not used unless you need them because it uses more memory.
And so the home users who are running Portainer on, really, really small edge devices don't want the features turned on by default, right? That are
they don't offer them value, so they don't want that bloat there, because that is also a bigger attack vector. So the more things you have running, the more things there are potential for hackers to try and exploit. So you always want to try and minimize your actual attack surface by only running the things you actually need.
Yeah,
which is why things are off by default.
When it comes to security, I think you guys have done a phenomenal job. You guys have really thought of everything. Like I love the fact that when you connect a host to a Portainer service, when I connect through port 9001, no other service can connect to that, right? It's literally blocked from that moment forward. So you're not exposed. You don't have to go in and spend all your time screwing with the firewalls and explicitly saying only this IP can hit the endpoint. Like, I love that. I mean, I still do that. I still set up those rules, but you guys have thought of even those. There are many elements of the way that you handle security that show me that you understand risk and as a organization. And that is encouraging as an architect. It gives me confidence in using your platform, to manage infrastructure, which is at the end of the day is what we use it for.
Well, remember, 95% of the employees in our company are engineers, right? So we're all engineers. We've all spent time either sitting in the hot aisle of a data center or on the factory floor with a hard hat, high vis, and steel toe shoes, right? We've all earned our chops out there in the real world, coming in now to try and create a product to solve the exact problems that we saw and experienced on a day-to-day basis. This isn't a bunch of business people who have got together and said, how do we try and make money? This is a bunch of engineers saying, how do we actually solve some real problems out there in the field? And so everything revolves around that. What keeps me awake at night is a supply chain compromise in our source code that then sees a hack get into our customer base. That's scary for me. And so the level of DD that we have and the amount of preventative security we have to ensure that never happens, or at least the best of our ability, is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Because I can't take that risk.
Right. Well, let me ask you the open source. So one of the things when I first looked at Portainer, I'm like, why is it more people don't use Business Edition? Right. I mean, to me, it just seems when I go to manufacturing facilities, this happens a lot. I'll see that there's going to be some engineer using the open source, the community edition, right? And I'll ask him why he doesn't use Business Edition, for support and all the additional features, the enterprise class features you get with that. And I'm like, why is it you don't use the Business Edition? And you want to know what the number one thing they say is? What's the Business Edition?
It's good enough?
No, they'll say, what's the Business Edition?
Oh, right.
It's the number one thing they'll say. I thought they would say, well, what I have is working. Like, I don't need to take this next step. For me, because I know the capabilities of the Business Edition, for me, I automatically license every instance. It's the first thing I do. I go and I'm going to add my business license to it because I know what I'm losing by not having it. But the first thing these guys say, and it's two different guys have said this to me now. They didn't even know they would describe themselves as power users of Portainer, but they didn't even know the Business Edition. They didn't even know the capabilities. Even though you guys do those little headers at the top and you talk about,
Yeah, the actual teasers.
Yeah, you do.
There's teasers through the app that attempts to show you what you're missing.
And it shocked me. It really did shock me that was the actual question. And part of the reason I wanted to do this podcast is I wanted to talk about, hey, there is so much power in the platform that people aren't unlocking in Industry 4, and they should be. There are some people out there like, Volkswagen and all the, there's many, many companies that use Portainer managing infrastructure and that kind of thing. But there's a lot more who could be that aren't, and they should be, right? So, which brings me into
you know what's funny though? Our biggest secret is our actual customer base, right? So everybody looks at us, and 9 times out of 10, if you ask what's Portainer, right, they'll say it's a cool tool for managing my Docker environment in small and medium business, right? The people who actually pay us money are some of the world's largest organizations, right? Global 2000. We have a lot of Fortune 500s. In fact, we have many of the Fortune 50s who are our actual customer base. We just can't talk about it. We're under strict NDAs with them, which is so incredibly frustrating, because my biggest thing is actually social proof. Prove that we are actually this strong enterprise product, and we're out there quietly achieving amazing things. We are used across defense all over America. We've got US Navy DADMS approval, right? No other container management platform has that approval. How did we get that? We got it by just doing what we do well and people wanting to do it. It was actually initiated not by us, but by the Navy. They're the ones who actually put us through the certification. And so that's why we've got such a focus on security. It's because we're used in some of the most critical infrastructure, national security. I've been to Washington, and I've been into very secure facilities to meet people who use Portainer. That's why we've got the focus. Now, outside of that paying customer base, they make us be better. But then by being better, we're better for everybody who uses the product. So we're better in regards of usability. We're far more focused in security. All these things that these giant organizations scale. One of our larger customers is already running 120,000 IoT devices with Portainer and growing at 7,000 a month forever, right? That forces us to rethink scale. So then when you look at a manufacturer who says, I've got 20,000 devices, we can do that in an afternoon. That's no problem. So these paying customers make us bigger and better, and yet hardly anyone knows that.
And that's where you get into these edge capabilities. So I've done tests up to 100,000 hosts. So I basically virtualize 100,000 hosts, and just with a bash script, I deploy, and then I connect, and can I manage, with Portainer? And that's when it starts getting into the edge capabilities, specifically edge groups and edge jobs make managing hundreds, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of devices seamless. I mean, I guess what we probably should do before I was switching to market segments, I was just thinking about this. A lot of people will ask me, Walker, you talked about virtualization in the beginning. 10 years ago, if what I wanted to do was create a virtual device, I would create a virtual machine running on inside of another operating system. So most people were using like VMware. You'd have VMware Workstation, and you would spin up a virtual machine. You'd need the ISO of Ubuntu or Windows 11 or whatever, and you would deploy. You'd create a virtual machine. You'd apportion some RAM and some hard disk, and you'd basically virtualize the operating system and create a physical operating system inside another operating system. Well, the problem with that is overhead. The number of virtual machines you can have running at the same time on one host is limited by RAM, CPU, and disk. Okay. And so then you're constantly in this cycle of, I either need $20,000 servers to be able to run 20 virtual machines, or I have to turn VMs on and off when I need them. Okay. And so now you got to deal with startup time and shutdown time. What containerization did was move the virtualization from the operating system down to the kernel. So basically wrap an application in a container. So I'm taking the application that runs inside the operating system, and I'm putting the application in a container, and that application has direct connection essentially to the kernel, which takes it down to the board, which, connects you to the network device and to the hard drive and to the file system and all that jazz. And so now on one host, I can put thousands and thousands of containers. I can have thousands and thousands of virtual environments running on the same host. That's the difference between virtual machines and containers. And so when Neil looks at that. He goes, well, obviously with those types of exponential gains, virtual machines are dead. And by the way, they are dead. I mean, VMs are dead. And now it's all containerized environments, right? This is where
the other benefit, if you flip it around, more than just hardware efficiency, right? From a software vendor perspective, we actually publish a container image and this thing called a manifest, which is simply the instructions to the container environment for how to run it. What it means is, as a software vendor, us, Litmus, any of the software guys who publish in containers, when their internal team are building an image and building the manifest, the way that runs in their QA environment is exactly the same way it runs on my laptop, my Windows laptop running Docker, on your laptop running Mac OS or someone else's laptop running Linux, or on an IoT device, or on a cloud server. It's exactly the same. So this whole thing of, hey, follow these install instructions, and the way that you install software is different from the way that I install software, because I've got different versions of Java or something running, right? So from a vendor perspective, it gives you way more certainty that your application is being run the same way everywhere in the world. And if it's not, it's probably broken for everybody. And then as the vendor, I can fix it, and I fix it for everybody. So from an application vendor standpoint, it is monumentally better, a better way to ship and support software, right? So they're all doing it. And then from an infrastructure perspective, it's far more efficient. Positive. Why would you not do this?
So the vast majority of your installs are from the community edition, the open source edition. And then you've got basically sitting on top of that, you have the business edition, which has some IP that's not, it's not in the open source edition, right? Correct. You're commoditizing the open source. What's the percentage of open source installs, if you were going to guess? I mean, it's always an astronomical number. What is the percentage of the...
I can tell you.
Yeah.
There's about 1.2 million monthly users of the open source product. So, 1.2 million. And these are the people who have analytics turned on. Yeah. And by the way, I watch every YouTube video that's made about us. And most people say in the YouTube video, I'll turn off analytics. Yes. So there's at least 1.2 million people who have analytics turned on who use Portainer on a monthly basis, right? So that's the CE version. Okay. From that to our paid version, I think we're up at about 200,000 users of the paid version.
That's a good number.
Which is a good number.
That's a really good number.
Good ratio. And the reason being is because of the 3-node free license. We've tried to move people more towards the paid version, because then when you decide you finally need some of the premium features, it's simply a license fee rather than a click redeploy.
That was exponential. That's an exponential, because that's recent. That's the last couple of years, right? That type of growth.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, and that is a huge number, dude. I mean, let's say half the people turn analytics on. So, half the people, or half turn them off. So you probably got something like more than 2 million monthly users with 200,000. So you're really looking at like 10, 12% and that's not normal. In the open source world, it's normally 1%, 0.5% to 1% are using the paid version, and 99 to 99.5% are using the open source. So that is a great number. That is a testament to the value of the business edition, that you have that type of conversion rate. Really.
Well, and also that we give 3 licenses away in a freemium model, so that those who don't need more than 3. So again, we're a company of techies who have home labs and experiment. We understand the value of technologists playing with technology. So the 3-node license isn't designed for production users. It's not. It's designed for technologists to roll up their sleeves and play with tech, learn, become proficient. And then here's the sales side of it: bring it into work. That's the whole thinking behind why we give away a 3-node free license. Of course, there's always money behind the scenes for these things, right?
And so for those of you who aren't familiar with Portainer, so I'm assuming most who watching here are familiar with Portainer, but let's say you don't. So when he says node, what he's talking about is a physical host. He's talking about I'm in my lab here. I've got, 20 hosts, probably something like that. assortments of ARM and AMD 64 architectures. I've got Raspberry Pis. I've got every single one of them has a Portainer agent running on it. I have 20. I think I have 20 in the home lab. So I'm using Business Edition in the home lab. But if I only had 3 of those devices, if I had 2 Raspberry Pis and a Dell Optiplex that I was running Ubuntu server on, and I put Docker on all of them, and then I deploy a Portainer agent, I can manage 3 of them using the free license with Portainer Business Edition.
But yeah,
you get that,
and the license,
you get the 3 nodes for free.
Is free forever, so you can keep using it. It's 100% fully featured. There are no restrictions, so you can turn on every single feature that you might possibly want to test and validate for use at work or in your enterprise, and you can learn and be completely confident with the entire stack of the product. That's the goal.
So when they go into work, when the technologist goes into work and they say, hey, I leverage if you look at how I manage Portainer here, the students in Mastermind and Mentorship, they know I show the home lab all the time, even the way we do power management in this building. I use little smart plugs, and Portainer is managing all the services that's doing everything, right down to even how I'm historizing the power usage, even the LLM, the agent that's running, that's doing the analysis, telling me which lights need to be turned off and how we should adjust the thermostat to save an extra $100 a month in electricity. Even that's running in a container managed by Portainer. When the technologist goes to work, so you've got the 3 market segments, right? You have OEMs in industry, you have integrators in industry, and you have end users in industry. The technologist works for one of those 3, right? Or so when they go to work, when someone is first using Portainer to manage containerization in their work, how are they doing it across those 3? Like, how does the OEM generally do it? How does the integrator generally do it? How does the end user generally start?
So here's the rub, right? And I like to be brutally honest here. Portainer is absolutely irrelevant in the Industry 4 context, right? Irrelevant. What's relevant in the Industry 4 context is the hardware and the software and the systems that make the manufacturing process better, right? We don't do that. What we do is help you get that hardware and software up and running and maintained like that, right? So we're irrelevant in the actual software stack that makes the changes, that makes factories better. But without us, the ability for you to get that software live and maintainable is infinitely harder, right? That's the honest answer about us, right?
So what I've got here is I'm gonna read off my normal development stack that I use Portainer to deploy. And the reason I use Portainer to deploy it is because of the edge capabilities. I'm able to group hosts together in groups, and then I can set up jobs to update as I update the manifest of my compose file. As I update my compose file and I update my image, I can set up jobs to update many groups of hosts automatically without me having to do anything. Okay. So when I do a development environment, every host in here, there's 20 hosts running in here. All of them have the same default containers running on them. I have one point where I've said, this is the environment I'm deploying on every single host every single time. Okay. And that in that environment is, I always deploy Postgres. I always deploy PG admin. I always deploy Ignition. I always deploy Timebase Historian, Timebase Explorer. That's my historian. That's the analytics tool. Timebase Collector. That's how I connect to data. Node-RED, HiveMQ Edge, Glances, which allows me to look at the health of the host. Okay, that's a container doing that. Hemdal, which allows me to create shortcuts for the host. Fail to ban, which protects the host from actors pinging it and trying to brute force it. Uptime Kuma, which allows me to monitor the services that are running in each of the containers. And now Litmus Edge, which I just added. Okay. And I have a I don't know what I've got a 336 line Docker Compose file that deploys all those things and wires them together by default. And I use Portainer to deploy that. For me, by using Portainer to do the management, especially the edge capabilities, the ones that people just don't use all that often, reduces my workload by a factor of 100 for the number of hosts that I do, hosts I manage. That's how like you did at the Prove It conference. You guys did a presentation. It was around oil rigs, right? It was a rig environment.
Yeah, it was with Seadrill.
Yeah. Will you tell that story? Like literally, without Portainer, what they're doing isn't even possible. I mean, it's like Portainer. You said it's really not that important. Portainer is mission critical to Seadrill.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So under the covers now again, right? So let's take your stack. Okay. Now let's first of all go back 10 years, even 5 years, right? And this is before the Industry 4 software was in containers, right? What is the number one ethos? You never update a running system, right? So you actually installed the software from the giant OEM, and you left it alone for 10 years, right? That was modus operandi. Okay, so yes, there was a surge of effort to get the project deployed into the plant, and then you left it alone for 10 years. Well, now, if you don't update your stack on at least a monthly basis of all of those products you just mentioned in your stack, how often do those update their images? Probably monthly.
Yeah. I'm seeing, and Portainer notifies me that the image needs to be, I get a notification in the front end. Now with observability, I can push that notification to myself, which is a new feature in 2.33, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes. But I check every other day. I am looking for the indication that one of the images running in my stack is out of date, and I need to pull the latest image. So, but I would say but in general, once a month. I would say once a month they update.
Okay, so let's say you got one server, right? And so once a month you want to update all 20 images, right? Cool. Now multiply that by 100 or 1,000 when you're talking about how it's running in the plant.
Or 100,000.
Now try and do that and do it every month.
Correct.
In Portainer, it's 3 clicks and you're done. To do it manually, you're talking about a project every single month, which won't get done because it just won't. And what that'll mean is the version of software you're running is falling behind. And there's these terrible things called CVEs, security vulnerabilities. The further you fall behind from current release, the more at risk you are. You can't do that. You can't. So if you're embracing this modern, open software stack as opposed to the old world proprietary, you have to accept that you need to update it on a regular basis. So you must update a running system regularly. How do you now do that at scale? Portainer. And if you don't, you're in for an absolute nightmare. So
in industry and manufacturing, you're going to market through those 3 segments, right? Obviously OEMs, integrators, and then the end users directly. And if they're using, community edition, and then they're like, hey, I should be using this at work, and they bring it into work, right? You're going through those 3 segments. What is a common use case that OEMs are using Portainer for? I mean, I can think of a million, but I want to hear from you.
Well, so the OEM guys, their goal is to sell hardware, and to sell hardware, they want to be different. And everybody knows that at scale there's a management problem, and so they like to bundle Portainer as part of their firmware or their base image load. And then they can say, here is a solution to the how do I manage this at scale problem. And so here's my hardware. And let's be honest, most hardware is the same as every other piece of hardware, right? So what's the difference?
There's a finite number of board makers and chip makers. So yeah,
there's a finite number. They almost all of them come from one country too, right? So then how do you offer value to be different? By solving problems. The problem is a manageability problem, right? So the OEMs love it from that perspective. The ISVs are saying, I need and want to ship my software as containers because it's better for me as the ISV. I can ship a better quality product. I can fix it quicker, and I have consistency in how my software is running. Okay, problem statement. My users couldn't even spell containerization. Right? What the heck is this? I mean, I can barely SSH, let alone run Docker commands. So how does a software provider enable their customer to deploy their software in containers where they may not know containers? Portainer, right? And then we've got the integrator and the end user who says, I need to deploy a project. In this project, there is a stack of 20 or 30 different pieces of software and hardware. How do I stitch this together into a cohesive management experience for my customer? Portainer. So bang, bang,
so
bang, done.
Here's an interesting thing, and I'll set up a call between you guys and this company. So one of the OEMs that I work with and consult with, and have a very close relationship with, is FreeWave. FreeWave is really known in the industry for 900 megahertz radio communications, right? That they basically, FreeWave is the company that makes the hardware and provides the cellular service to connect disconnected networks, oil and gas and water pipelines and all that jazz. All right. They have a new product. It's a new device that I have a prototype of in my office. They were in the office last week. And I was going through, I'm getting ready to embed the device in my lab. And the first thing I said to him was, you know what this device is? So the device basically allows you to put dual SIM on it, and then it has their Zentry security. So Zentry is like a VPN to the device. It's basically FreeWave's secure access into any FreeWave device, but also you're going to be able to put Zentry on a non-FreeWave device as well, non-FreeWave. And the very first thing, literally, as I was having the talk with the product manager, I said, the very first thing, I said, what this is missing is Portainer on board for managing the containers that I can deploy into this environment. You should be shipping this device with Portainer on board, like first and foremost. So now I can connect to that FreeWave Edge device over Zentry securely, and then I can hit the Portainer endpoint. I can go into the service, and I can deploy any container to run on that edge device use the IO to track industrial data points. I can't tell you the number of times I talk to hardware vendors where that is my first recommendation. I'm like, what you are missing is Portainer on board here. And I was thinking about this. Litmus Edge, they go to market. Litmus goes to market through a lot of hardware providers. There are a lot of hardware providers who white label Litmus's software. And now Litmus just came out with this developer edition using Docker, which we're deploying via Portainer. We really ought to connect you with FreeWave, and we need to connect you with Litmus. But I know you're already working with Litmus because Litmus is one of the templates you can deploy in Portainer already. But for go-to-market. So right now, I know you guys already have a partnership, but honestly, there's another major company I can think of that I was advising on their piece of hardware, and they came out with this piece of hardware that Portainer should be running on. They came out with 2 versions, and I just shot a bunch of videos on it. It's all private videos. I can't mention the name of the company on the podcast, but I'll tell you privately so we can connect you guys together. But they should have Portainer on board as well. And now the more I think about it, the more I think if I'm selling hardware, any hardware that is running a Linux operating system, that would be my first default, you should be shipping Portainer on board. You should be supporting Docker, and you should be shipping Portainer on board.
Yep. If you are selling hardware and it is still running a proprietary operating system, and then what are you doing? So any hardware should be running a Linux operating system. It should be capable of running Docker, because every software vendor out there is now shipping their stuff in containers. And so if you don't support containers, you're basically old-fashioned and gone. And so then all of a sudden you've now got that scale management problem. How do you now manage thousands and thousands of these devices? It's a big problem, right? It's a huge problem. And so that centralized management at massive scale is a serious hard nut to be cracked.
So of those 3 segments, this is OEMs, systems integrators, end users. Which of those 3 segments is your largest segment right now? That is the largest portion of your Industry 4 install base falls into which one of those three? And then number two, which is the fastest growing?
Well, our install base is always in the customer, so not there's it's not an install base.
But is it the integrator
channel.
who's taking it to the customer, or is it the customer who's discovering Portainer on their own?
It's actually the ISV. It's a software vendor who has the biggest problem.
So
how do I get my software running out at the plant when the people out there may not necessarily know how to install and run Docker-based software.
So if you're in Portainer right now, you can go into Portainer and you can look at templates. If you go right now, you could go and install Portainer literally in 60 seconds. You could be looking in Portainer. And if you look in the templates section, if you want to deploy a template to a host, if you look in that section, you'll have a list of software in there that you could deploy. Ignition's one of them. Litmus. There's Mosquito Pro from Sadalo. There's a lot of them in there. Are those the ISVs that are growing your business, or is it others? It's those growing your business. It's those. Okay, got it.
So those are the ones who have formally approached us and said, we want to be in your catalog. We make sure that if it's in our catalog, it's tested and validated. I'm sure there are other ISVs out there. I know there are other ISVs out there who recommend Portainer as the deployment, but they haven't reached out to us to do so formally.
So I did a thing.
They're the ones that formally have.
I did a thing with Fuse MES not too long ago, and they're based in Michigan, but I met them in Indianapolis. And one of the first things I said to them, they have a software-based gateway that they install inside the manufacturing facility, and then that gateway is what connects to their service in the cloud, where you build out your manufacturing execution system, and you basically push the configuration to this gateway. And one of the first things I said to him was, you guys need to be in Portainer. That gateway should be deployable from Portainer as a template. You just wrap it as a container and deploy it. And it's so the reason I say that is if a company wants to be how does a company go from not being a Portainer partner, a software company, to being a Portainer partner where their software shows up as a template in that list? What's the step they have to go through?
Yeah, well, on our website, there's actually a link to become a partner. They fill that link in, we contact them, get the details for their application. We put it through our test and validation, make sure that it's safe and secure and it's reliable to be deployed at scale. And we work with them to properly template it. We sign up an agreement that says we'll work together to actually promote this thing, and off we go. It's very simple. There's no money involved. It's simply is this a good thing? We as Portainer want our edge templates to be the application catalog for industry. That's our goal. So there should not be a piece of software that you want to use in industry that's not in our app catalog. My goal is to get as many in that catalog as you need to get any piece of software you need for your Industry 4 modernization in our catalog. Click, deploy, done. That's what I want.
I don't know if you can answer this question. Hopefully you can. First off, do you track which templates get deployed the most? Do you know which ones get deployed the most?
Yes and no. So we don't like to be intrusive in regards to analytics. We have some analytics in the front end. They're those things that you can turn off and turn on. And so some people turn it on, some people turn it off. When it's on, but your system is air gapped, then all of those analytics fail. Nothing comes back to us. So yes, asterisk. Yes, if analytics are turned on and the Portainer instance isn't running in an air gap network, then yes, we see that. If no, then we don't.
Which template gets deployed the most then? That's my follow-up.
I would have to go log in and check. I don't know.
If you had to guess, I think for me it would probably be, I know the one that I've deployed the most is Mosquito Pro, because
it's the MQTT brokers by a long way.
Okay, all right. I was gonna say, because I know for me, I know I've deployed EMQX a lot as a template, and I know I've deployed Mosquito Pro a lot as a template in in Portainer.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to
the MQTT brokers are the backbone for the industry for, right? It's the backbone for data transfer. So those things get deployed everywhere.
All right, real quick, let's get into version 2.3.3. So for those of you who work with Portainer, you should notice that if you just did an update to your Portainer looks completely different. There's a whole fresh new look. It's much more performant. You can tell that you guys made changes, went more native React. It looks like in some of the pages on how we manage inside of Portainer. But there's a couple of features that I want to talk about before we call it a day. So that I think are game changers in the new version 2.3.3. So number one, observability. So this observability is essentially industrial monitoring and alerting capabilities, which everyone really, the way they were doing that in the past is you were building the monitoring into your own container image, likely in Python, and you were deploying it out to the host and you were handling your monitoring yourself. You guys have now baked observability. You're calling it the observability feature in Portainer. And why don't you quickly go over what observability is and why you guys created it? Like how should Industry 4 professionals be leveraging it?
Okay, so it is the start of a multi-phase internal story as part of our internal product management. So yes, it's called observability, but the first thing we released is alerting, right? So there will be better observability in regards to log aggregation and performance monitoring coming soon, right? But right now it's alerting. And the reason for that is because alerting is the number one most requested thing that we've had for a very long time. And so we said, finally, we'll add it. And actually what we do behind the scenes is we actually install Alert Manager, which is a very, very well adopted piece of open source technology inside the core Portainer container image. So when you enable alerting, we actually start the Alert Manager service, and then we are configuring Alert Manager to monitor a bunch of Portainer internal endpoints, which, by the way, are a Prometheus conformant structure. And so we're monitoring those things, and we can generate alerts when certain things happen. Now, we're at the moment, there's about 10 or 12 pre-canned alerts in the first version. That's going to be extended into more and more alerts. And those alerts are the most critical things that you need to know if your system goes down, and we'll trigger those alerts.
Okay. The code completion and validation. So this I've been waiting for. So in Docker Compose, which is basically in the web editor of Stack. Okay, so if you're creating a stack and you go into the web editor, so where you're actually going to type in the Compose file or paste it in, you guys now have code completion and validation. Why don't you talk quickly about that? Where did that come from, and what are the core features of code completion and validation? By the way, it is exactly as it sounds. There's a little header at the top that's basically validating, telling you whether or not you've got it looks like a linting error, really is how it looks, but it's really powerful. Where did it come from, and how should people be using it? So
one of the best things about containerization is the fact that everything is deployed and configured as YAML. Behind the scenes, everything is actually a YAML definition. One of the worst things about it is that everything is a YAML definition. And YAML is an unmitigated disaster of indents and indents and indents, and you've got to get the indents right and aligned. And oh my goodness, I used to have a little slide ruler on top of my laptop screen. I could move it across so I could check the indents. And so the amount of wasted time and effort trying to debug a compose file, which is just YAML one scenes, to try and decode that to make sure that its syntax correct, is astronomical. So the autocorrect is there to help those people who don't live and breathe YAML, which, by the way, is a very specific language and skill set that most people won't possess. It is a nice way for you to be able to use, write, edit is more accurate. I mean, I don't think many people listening to this will be writing their own compose files. They'll probably be editing ones that people have shared. So when you edit it, it'll come up with an error, and I've made a mistake, and you can correct it easily with that autocomplete. So again, our whole thing here, right, is trying to make something very, very complicated available to the mass market. Things like autocomplete further that endeavor.
I want to end on a big question, but I want to, before we get to that last part, what's coming down the road? So obviously observability is expanding, right? You're starting with alerting, but you're going to add a whole bunch of other features. Anything else that we should be on the lookout for in the roadmap?
There's a couple of massive things coming. And I'm going to steal some thunder from the SPS fair coming up in Nuremberg later this year. So there's a couple of things, right? One is Kubernetes, love it or hate it, is fundamentally dominating mind share, right? Whilst Docker might have been the actual technology that kicked off this whole new wave, Kubernetes is dominating mind share. It's at least dominating the marketing budgets, and so therefore it dominates the results of AI and Google searches, right? So if you ask questions, the answer is Kubernetes. Kubernetes is incredibly bloated to use on lightweight devices in the factory, and there's a lot of moving parts.
Which is why Docker is the choice of Industry 4, and it has nothing to do with Docker is superior. It's that Kube contains
simpler.
Yeah, Docker is simple. Docker is to MQTT what Kubernetes is to AMQP and broker technology.
Yep, but so we said, how do we bring the best of Kubernetes to the industrial edge without the worst of Kubernetes? And so we have our own Kubernetes distro now called kubesolo.io.
Kubesolo?
It is Kubernetes, kubesolo.
Okay.
Design, and it's Kubernetes designed to run on devices with 512 megabytes of memory. If you have more, great, but you don't need it. And so it's the start of the enablement of running Kubernetes everywhere. It is a single binary, kubesolo binary, like Docker. It's all self-contained. You can run kubesolo. You install it and you run kubesolo. It's Kubernetes on a single device in about 200 megabytes of RAM footprint, versus 600 meg or more for the next nearest Kubernetes distro.
So this is alpha, beta, or production ready? Where are we right now?
It's on beta release 6.
Okay.
The goal is for it to be production release in November, in time for KubeCon, which is in Atlanta. So that the goal is for that to be production ready. It's already winning. It's open source, by the way, so completely free and open source. It is already winning a lot of love and attention in the IoT space because it needs so little resources. It can run on very, very small devices that need strict power management controls, right? So that's the first thing. So if you have to run Kubernetes at the edge, this is the best way to do it. Otherwise, keep running Docker because it's still the lightest way, easiest way. But the industry is moving away from that and definitely more towards Kubernetes.
One of the things I wanted to say real quick is when it comes to the Prove It conference, a lot of people asked me how we put on the Prove It conference with the virtual factory, and why is it never happened before? Why how did you actually pull it off technically? And one of the first answers I give everyone is without Portainer, it wouldn't have been possible. It wouldn't have been feasible. It would have been possible. I just would have taken a lot more man hours and a lot more time and a lot more engineers to pull it off. Portainer was one of the backbones of our infrastructure. I mean, every single host, every container running on every host, the entire infrastructure was managed in Portainer. There was not a single host that was not being managed wholly, every application on it, by Portainer. And even to this day, we're doing Prove It at ICC. Same thing, same infrastructure. It's that much of a game. It literally made our conference possible. And I wanted to make sure I gave a plug there because it's important to understand the capabilities. And it leads me into my last question, which is, if I were you, I'd be kind of frustrated with industry. I mean, I would be optimistic, right? Obviously, because you've seen massive growth. If you're at 200,000, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, that 20% are on the business edition, even if they're using the 3-node license. But if you were going to say to those working in Industry 4, whether they're an end user, OEM, or an integrator, you were going to grab him by the shirt and shake him and go, God damn it, you keep doing this, and you really should stop doing this, and you should do this. What would that be? What is it? What is the thing you would tell all of industry if you could?
Focus on the jobs to be done and find the quickest way to solve those. Right? I think we get incredibly caught up in technology for technology's sake. What are the jobs to be done, and what is the technology that addresses those jobs to be done, and then forget about everything else. If you are trying to invent a job to be done to justify technology, wrong answer. What are the jobs that you need to do every day on the floor? The people who support the people on the floor, the people in the back office who need to monitor the OEM metrics to make changes. What are their jobs to be done, and how does technology help them? And then how do you get that technology live? Inventing a job to justify technology is tech for tech's sake. Get rid of it.
I agree, and I always say focus on the problem. The number one advice, I focus on the damn problem. The part of the reason you're coming to me for help is because you're not focusing on the problem. What is the actual problem you're trying to solve? And to that point, it made me think of this. When someone in a manufacturing environment ever says, why do we do it that way? Why is it we do it this way? You know what they're actually saying? This is a problem for me. This is a problem I need to solve. That's what they're saying. If you ever ask yourself, why do we do it this way? What you're actually saying is, this is a problem I need to solve. Yeah. All right. With that, awesome. Neil, dude, I super appreciate you taking the time. I also want to say this. I've given you guys a shout out in a couple of, in the last few lessons and the last few videos that, you guys are sponsoring the Industry 4 community this month. And we are incredibly grateful to the organizations who sponsor the community, because 4.0 Solutions, we operate basically at break even. We spend every dollar on education. Literally, our whole business model is whatever we take in, we put back into education. We break even every year. And it is the vendors. It's folks like you. It's folks like Litmus. It's Maintenex. It's TatSoft. It's Inductive Automation. It's these companies who say, literally, you guys come to us and you go, we want to help the community, and we'll figure out what we get out of it later. Literally, the conversations are never, I want to leverage this first. It's always, how do we help first? And we'll figure out a way to make it work commercially for everybody, right? And I just want to say thank you very much for sponsoring the community this month. It's been invaluable. I'm thankful to all the sponsors, but I want to make sure I say to you and to anybody who's listening and watching, I use Portainer every single day. Like, without exception, there are no days I'm not using Portainer. We only accept sponsorships from companies whose products we use and we truly believe in. And let me say this. Portainer is in the top 3 products that if I told you must have it, you have to have it. Portainer is one of 3 products I would say you must have. So, Neil, thank you very, 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 very much for your sponsorship, your time. For those of you who want to know more, if you want to be a partner, if you're an OEM, want to be a partner, there will be a link down in the description. Also, I will be publishing to a public repository. The link to that public repository will be down below. It'll have have instructions for installing Portainer, how to set up Portainer on your host, how to deploy my development stack that I listed off here, how to import the environment variables so that you are secure. And that will be available in a public GitHub repository that you'll be able to find in the description down below, including all the instructions you need to get started. So if you're new to Portainer, you'll be able to learn how to use Portainer and put an Industry 4 infrastructure in at the exact same time. So
can I just leave you one last thing, right?
Yeah.
So in your Industry 4 Discord, which we are there, and we try to answer questions wherever possible. There's someone in there called Matthew Paris, right? And many of you know him, right? That he's in there. We are currently co-designing a new product for Portainer with Matthew. right? It's a new industrial marketplace portal. It is designed exclusively for industrial users. The entire hierarchy of the product is industrial first. Build out your plant and machinery construct, attach applications to your lines, to your devices, see everything. It's been built 100% off the back of Matthew's jobs to be done inside his current employer. I encourage those in the industry for this to go and speak to Matt and try and get some kind of cool insights around what's coming. He has helped us design the UI UX that will be released at SBS in Nuremberg. Expect it to be absolutely transformational because it is 100% built to solve the jobs to be done in the manufacturing sector.
And I'll say this about Matthew, so I'm glad you brought it up. So Matt Paris is an OG in the community. He and Jeff Schrader were kind of like two of the original guys who love to nerd out on IoT. Jeff Schrader's now at HighByte, and they're OGs in the community. Matt and I had a very long conversation last week about Portainer. So a DM back and forth in Discord. We had a long private conversation, and we were effusive in our praise about the direction you guys have gone, how you get it, how much the platform has developed. But I wanted to say this. Matt is the guy who manages the public IIoT catalog. So if you want to see, he actually keeps a list. He has a criteria for public IIoT platforms, hardware and software, at matthewgea.github.io/IIoT. So Matthew, GEA, that stands for GE Appliances. He's the director of Industry 4 and IIoT at GE Appliances. .github.io/IIoT. Go there. The public IoT catalog is there. But Matt and I had a very long conversation about Portainer, and both of us were equal in our effusive praise of the platform. And the reason, and I don't fanboy a lot. It's not, but I am so, Portainer is one of the few tools out there that has drastically reduced my workload, but more importantly, exponentially increased my ability to have impact for my customers. So if I measure impact in a week, I measure it in a month, I measure it in a quarter, I measure it in a year. If you look at how I measure it year over year, month over month, quarter over quarter, week over week, Portainer plays a huge role in me being able to capture new gains each week. 100% of work this week.
Very happy to hear that.
Portainer is a must-have. It's why it's in my top 3. So with that,
cool.
Like, subscribe, comment down below, and we will see y'all in the next one.